and welcome once again to another episode of Jazzology, a rather special episode of Jazzology, because we're going to be talking about a wonderful audio documentary series titled No Regrets. I'm going to have that conversation with Adam Savage.
Willard, thanks for having me on today to talk about the show. We were excited to produce the show with you. I know that was the first time we actually got to work with you, long before we even started Jazzology.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I think a lot of the public doesn't realize is just how long this project has been in development, trying to figure out the best way to get it made and get it out there for everyone to hear. And so, we're excited that it's currently airing, as we record this on KKJZ, and will be more widely available here in the future. And so if you follow Savage Content and go to thesavagecontent.com, you'll get more information as it becomes available. But I think today, I'm going to turn the tables on you a little bit. I'm going to be acting a little bit more as host and putting you in the hot seat and asking you some questions. So I think the first question to ask is how you got involved with No Regrets in the first place.
Well, I heard from Steve Robinson. Steve Robinson, who's the producer of this series. We have a lot of mutual professional connections and a lot of mutual friends. And Steve Robinson and also Kent Savage reached out about No Regrets. And it was something that I really appreciated Steve's approach to the series, because Steve's approach to the series is about documenting Billie Holiday, the musician, the vocalist, the songwriter, as opposed to so many treatments that we've seen of Billie Holiday have focused on the pathos of her life and the arc of her life as it relates less to music and more about the interpersonal relationships and more about her various struggles, trials, and tribulations. And there's been a kind of sensationalism around Billie Holiday, treatments of Billie Holiday, biographically speaking, in that regard. We can think about the films, for example, that have been produced on Billie Holiday's life, starting with Lady Sings the Blues, mm-hmm. and also including Lee Daniels' film of a couple of years ago. The films about Billie Holiday have tended to focus so much on the pathos of her life and less upon her impact, musically speaking. And sometimes that focal point on the pathos of her life has not only missed the point of her artistry, but has also kind of gotten it wrong about how things went down historically. For example, Lee Daniels' film on Billie Holiday focused on Strange Fruit and on how supposedly Billie Holiday was hounded by the authorities as a direct result of Strange Fruit. Well, Billie Holiday was hounded by the authorities not so much about Strange Fruit, but about her involvement in narcotics. And we know that to be factual. But, there was this strange sense that somehow Strange Fruit and her singing of Strange Fruit was her downfall and what took her down. And there was a lot more to her story than simply that.
Well, and that's an interesting, position to be coming from, to especially, for as well recognized, as well known of a musician as she is, her musicianship does get lost in so much else about her. And so, that's an interesting way to approach it. So how did you, and that's not an easy thing to do. So, how did you start diving into that?
Well, we started diving into that because Savage Content, fortunately, was able to access a vast treasure trove of interviews that were conducted by a woman by the name of Linda Kuehl, who had eyes to produce this grand documentary treatment of Billie Holiday, but never got to the point of producing that. But in the meantime, she interviewed a number of Billie Holiday intimates, including some of the great musicians who worked with Billie Holiday. And her focal point was on the artistry of Billie Holiday. And of course, in dealing with the artistry of Billie Holiday, you're going to come across those elements of pathos in her personal life that are indelible. But we don't desire, or we did not desire, when we went into producing this particular series, No Regrets, we had no desire to drift off into total focal point on the issues that she faced during her life. Our focal point was on the artistry of Billie Holiday. And if you think about the artistry of Billie Holiday, and if you recognize the artistry of Billie Holiday, you recognize that she is one of the great American artists of the 20th century and one of the most influential American artists of the 20th century. And so that became our focal point, was to recognize the great artistry and to uplift the story of the great artistry of Billie Holiday.
And I think you guys did an amazing job with that. You really went in depth. I know you guys talk about, part of the reason it took so long for this program to come out was just how in depth you guys go, especially on the music side. There's so many different cuts in this because, one of the things, I learned, helping with this project is that she apparently never sung the same way twice, so you have all these different recordings of the same songs and you have all these different variations. So what was it like, kind of digging into that side of it?
Well, Billie Holiday was a master improviser, a master of vocal improvisation. And so, as you say, various performances of some of her standard songs by Billie Holiday, you can find differences in the way she approached those songs, not only from record to record, but from moment to moment. One night, she might perform a certain song in a certain way, and it might be quite different the following evening if you were to see her performing that same song. So Billie Holiday is someone who embodied the aspect of vocal performance, improvisation, and artistry. In that, you're right. She didn't go out on stage with a kind of rote performance where she was going to sing the same songs the same way every time. She knew how to nuance those songs and those lyrics so that they truly reached the listener and the audience who were experiencing her artistry.
Mm-hmm. And what was your favorite thing that you have been able to highlight with this program so far?
My favorite thing? I can't really say I have a favorite thing because there's so many elements of this series that really appeal to my sensibility in terms of someone who is immersed in this art form we know as jazz, and someone who is somewhat of a historian of the art form and that kind of thing. Learning more about Billie Holiday's artistic approach as opposed to those other elements that we mentioned earlier, uh, really gained, I really gained a much greater appreciation for the artistry of Billie Holiday, which is exactly what Steve Robinson intended in the production. So I'm hopeful that the listeners, those who experience this series, will have a similar experience in terms of their viewpoint of Billie Holiday going forward.
Mhm. And was there something that you were surprised to learn, something that you maybe didn't know before going into this?
Well, you know, now you're asking me to spoil it for the listeners, and I'm not going to do that.
Yeah,
But I will say that listening to some of the great artists who were closely affiliated with Billie Holiday, listening to people like Count Basie, listening to people like the great drummer Joe Jones, or the tenor saxophonist Lester Young, who was very close to Billie Holiday, listening to folks like that testify to the artistry of Billie Holiday was very, very revealing, and very much drove my writing as far as scripting this particular series. Those Linda Kuehl interviews proved to be so revelatory in terms of her artistry, and just in terms of the musicians' response to Billie Holiday and Billie Holiday's artistry. The musicians were not talking in terms of the troubles. We all know about the troubles of Billie Holiday. That wasn't the focal point of the musicians talking about Billie Holiday. What they talked about was what it was like working with her, what they observed in how she addressed lyrics, what they observed about how she varied her performance of those songs from night to night. And hearing those expressions from the musicians, listening to those interviews was very much a revelation for me. And then we also had a lot of contemporary interviews. I mean, we interviewed great vocalists like Dee Dee Bridgewater and Cassandra Wilson, and we interviewed scholars like the late Phil Shapp. And if you know anything about Phil Shapp, you know that Phil Shapp could tell you what he had for breakfast 10 years ago, okay? And it could tell you what Charlie Parker had for lunch in 1944. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you get those kinds of insights, and it really helps to further illustrate the great artistry of Billie Holiday and the real humanity with which Billie Holiday approached her music and these songs and life in general.
Well, and in addition to the Kuehl interviews and these contemporary interviews, some of I know the research also came from the Phil Shapp archive. You know, yes. Phil had his show archived for 40. Going back to the 70s, and we were able to digitize that and make that available to you guys, episodes that were relevant to Billie. And so, and then, fortunately, we were able to have you speak with Phil before his passing. But how were the other interviews selected? How did you decide who else you wanted to talk to?
Well, in the case of Billie Holiday and her being such an influential musician and singer, you lean towards people who have achieved a certain stature in their artistry on the contemporary side, and who have recognized the influence of Billie Holiday, and folks who have spoken so glowingly about the influence of Billie Holiday and what Billie Holiday meant to their development. For example, I mentioned the fact that we interviewed Dee Dee Bridgewater, who was one of our leading vocalists. Well, not only is Dee Dee Bridgewater one of our leading vocalists, but she happened to play the lead role in stage performance, stage plays about Billie Holiday. So not only did she have that musical sensibility of the artistry of Billie Holiday and how that artistry of Billie Holiday influenced her development as a singer, but she also had the up close and personal, very personal, as she described it, experiences of actually playing Billie Holiday on stage for various stage productions. And of course, we all know about the great piece, Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill, which a number of people have seen in terms of stage productions about Billie Holiday. And speaking with someone like Dee Dee Bridgewater, who played that role and who played the role of Billie Holiday in other stage productions, was very important. Dee Dee, for example, was able to talk about how personally affected, the personal effect of playing Billie Holiday night after night, and how that affected her and her psyche. And hearing Dee Dee speak in those terms is very important to the series, and an important element to include in the series, that level of pathos.
Well, and you are such a fantastic interviewer. And so that's why, as much as the Kuehl, interviews and the Phil interviews made up the jumping off point, kind of the start of the research, a lot of the program is these more contemporary, interviews, the song cuts and the narration. So who of the people you interviewed for this, was there anyone, because you have an illustrious career, you've obviously an NEA jazz grandmaster, you've been able to talk to a lot of people in your career. Was there anyone you got to talk to for this program that you'd never had the chance to sit down and interview before?
Yeah, Angela Davis would be someone I never had an opportunity to sit down and interview before. And Angela Davis is such a first-class intellectual to begin with. Mm-hmm. And she has done such great work studying this music we call jazz, and in particular, women's contribution to this music we call jazz. She has championed women's contribution to this music we call jazz. And she provided some wonderful intellectual, shall we say, resources in her take on Billie Holiday's artistry, and how Billie Holiday's artistry so moved her and so affected the scene in which Billie Holiday came out of, and so affected future scenes in terms of vocalists going forward. In that regard, we also interviewed Cassandra Wilson, who is one of our leading vocalists, and one of our she and Dee Dee Bridgewater, of course, are some of our more seasoned vocalists, shall we say. But on the other hand, we were able to interview someone like Andromeda Toure, who is a younger vocalist on the scene, who has also been impacted by the artistry of Billie Holiday. And in addition to those folks, as I say, we talked to authors, historians, intellectuals, leading musicians. We also, and this was a great Steve Robinson find, we also interviewed someone like a young British woman named Beth Roars, who has done some wonderful study on YouTube of the artistry of Billie Holiday and what it is about the greatness of Billie Holiday that continues to impact the scene. And so she was able to break down musically what Billie Holiday was conveying in her artistry. So you had that. We were also able to interview the late, great Dan Morgenstern, who just passed recently. And Dan, one of the great historians of this music. Those who don't know Dan should know that he was the founding director of the Institute of Jazz Studies at Rutgers University campus in Newark. And that is one of the great archives of this music we call jazz. And so Dan Morgenstern brought that kind of archival knowledge, and he also brought up close and personal knowledge, having experienced Billie Holiday in performance, because I unfortunately never experienced Billie Holiday directly live in performance. My experience with Billie Holiday was based upon recordings and based upon the legend. So having the insights of someone like Dan Morgenstern, for example, or the author Farah Jasmine Griffin, who is another one of the historians and intellectuals who has delved deeply into the artistry of Billie Holiday, having those kinds of insights, I think, is new in terms of the biographical treatment of Billie Holiday, and shall we say, in terms of the audio biographical audio and video when you consider the films. So having the insights of people like that, I think, really provides some substantial reporting on Billie Holiday's artistry, which is really what our focal point has always been, the artistry of Billie Holiday.
Well, and, I think you did such a great job, not just focusing on the artistry, but focusing on how her artistry is really what's continuing her legacy.
Exactly.
More than anything else.
We do, and I emphasize the word tasteful. We do tastefully report on the pathos. We don't ignore those extra personal elements, those off the bandstand elements, shall we say, that unfortunately plagued Billie Holiday, or that she was unfortunately engaged in. We don't ignore that, but we want to emphasize the historic nature of the artistry of Billie Holiday. That's been our focal point.
Well, and, I think it's a good focal point, because there are plenty of people who have either been musicians or otherwise in the public eye for some reason, who have had tragic circumstances in their life.
Yes, exactly.
And they do not have the lasting legacy that Billie does, because even, all these years later, even, people, millennials, Gen Zers, Gen Alpha, many of them still know who Billie Holiday is. But you can,
yes, I think even people who don't know jazz or have no stake in jazz or have no relationship to the jazz art form, they know who Billie Holiday is and was. And I emphasize is because of her ongoing influence.
Right. And they don't know her because of her tragic circumstances. They know of her because of her artistry and how enduring it is, and not just her artistry in the moment, but how it's gone on to affect, future.
But on the other hand, part of our goal and part of our premise with this series is to better inform the general public about the artistic impact of Billie Holiday, so that artistic impact is known, as opposed to those other elements, as we refer to them as those other elements of the pathos of her life. We want to impact the listener positively on the artistry of Billie Holiday, so that people who experience this series, No Regrets, leave the experience understanding the greatness of Billie Holiday's artistry, and so that those other elements don't cloud over her artistic greatness. Right. Because, those other elements are more, shall we say, sensational, and they would tend to have an overshadowing influence on people's impression of Billie Holiday if the kinds of information and the kinds of insights that we're bringing in this series if they were not brought out. And so I think that Steve and our team has done a wonderful job of expressing those artistic elements that we want people to understand and appreciate.
Yeah. Well, and it really just ends up being a celebration of Billie. And like you said, I think this is what, pat ourselves on the back. I think this is a great program, not only for, hardcore Billie fans, that they will get something out of this, but it's also a great program if you know nothing about Billie. You will become a fan of hers by the end of, episode 1, let alone by the time you get to the end of episode 13, which is the final.
And that has been our goal all along.
Mm-hmm. And
that's our mission.
Did a great job. Now, I think we're getting close to wrapping up here. We don't want to, we wanted to give people a little special, insight into the program, but we don't want to go too long today. But, one final thing I want to ask, was there anything special, anything fun, anything cool that you just couldn't include that you really liked that you want to share here today that just couldn't make the final cut of the program?
Adam, I really can't pinpoint anything of that nature, because I think that our team has done a good job of incorporating all of the right elements. And so there's nothing I can think of that, wow, I wish we'd included that. There's none of that kind of aha moment. Oh my God, we didn't include so and so and so and so, or such and such and such and such. No, I don't feel that way. I feel very good about what we were able to capture and what we're able to convey to the listening public about the artistry of Billie Holiday.
Awesome. Well, we are fortunate to have not only been able to produce this project with you and Steve, but that this project led to us meeting you and getting, that I now get to work with you on a very regular basis, even if the Jazzology audience normally doesn't get to see me or hear my name. That's pretty deliberate, but Willard gets to work with me on a regular basis, and I get to, learn a lot more about him and, what an amazing person he is, both professionally and personally. And, we are so fortunate to have been a part of this project. Again, the music, No Regrets, the music and spirit of Billie Holiday, an in-depth 13-episode radio and live streaming series celebrating Billie Holiday's extraordinary musical legacy. The program explores her early life, groundbreaking singing style, and the powerful impact of Strange Fruit on the civil rights movement, produced by the award-winning Steve Robinson and written by our very own Willard Jenkins. No Regrets is narrated by the amazing Rhonda Hamilton. The series features interviews with Angela Davis, Cassandra Wilson, Beth Roars, Andromeda Ture, Phil Schaap, Dan Morgenstern, and many, many more. Just a murderer's row of interviews. No Regrets, the music and spirit of Billie Holiday, is airing as we speak. It's just wrapping up its run on KKJZ, that's 88.1 FM, KJazz in LA, and you can live stream it by going to savagecontent.com and getting links there.
Well, I got to turn around and ask you a question.
Okay, yeah, sure.
What are the future distribution plans for No Regrets?
So right now, like I said, like we just said, it is airing on KKJZ, and you can, regardless of if you live in the LA area or not, you can tap into their airing of it live via the web every Wednesday and Thursday at 9 p.m. Pacific. It should be going up on the PRX system very soon. We don't have an exact date, but once it is, the link will be available to the public to be able to listen through PRX. And then as we go into 2025, we are starting a campaign for NPR stations to air the program across the country. So if you stay tuned to savagecontent.com and Savage Content Socials. That's at Savage CNTNT on all platforms. You'll get the latest about where we are airing. I think we've got Boston, one of the stations in Boston lined up for February. But I don't have that information on hand with their call sign or anything, unfortunately. But I know that's just the start, that we're hoping to really kick that program into overdrive here as we move into the new year. And, we're just excited that it is finally getting out there for people to hear it.
Absolutely. And it's called No Regrets, the music and spirit of Billie Holiday.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Willard, for your amazing work on No Regrets. Thank you for your amazing work on Jazzology. And, we look forward to doing much, much more with you in the future. And I think, with that said, we'll say goodbye. And, everybody, you'll get your regular Jazzology back next episode. You won't have to deal with me again. So
please sign up to play Jazzology.
Sign up to play Jazzology. We always need more contestants. If you want a fun Jazzology t-shirt or a fun Savage Content t-shirt, you can find them in the store at savagecontent.com as well. So,
alrighty.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next episode.